Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Utikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the challenges and triumphs within those fields, as well as sometimes those things on the periphery that influence those fields as well. So it's inspiring, informative, and very much inquisitive. My guest today is a product manager for SaaS platforms. He has vast experience as a project manager and a solution architect. In the Agile world, he has experience as a Scrum Master, an Agile Project Manager, and a product owner. Please help me welcome to today's show, joining us from Vancouver, Canada, Anatoly Shamkin. Welcome, Anatoly.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Nice to see you.
No, you're very much welcome. So I like to ask many of my guests about their journey into the project management or business analysis world. Maybe we'll start with you and ask you, how did you get started in project management?
Well, years ago I graduated from the university with a software engineering degree, specifically in the area of the process automation and ERP. And I started after graduation. I started as a software development engineer in the steel mills factory, right? So I enjoyed writing code, and at the same time, I was realizing that I'm kind of sitting on one side of the fence, and at some point I decided that I want to try the other part, right? And what I discovered essentially was that for me, like personally, it was much more fun and to kind of sit in that position, like in between the we can call it customers, we can call it market, we can call it like stakeholders on one side and the engineers on the other side. And it's just such an amazing, essentially, job, because you're kind of building things that actually being used by people. And what I found was that this particular role is much more challenging, right, compared to engineering roles, because when you are an engineer, you're dealing with technical issues, right? When you're working as a project manager or like business analyst, you're dealing with the most complex creatures in this world, human beings, right? And you are kind of grow on the soft skill sides. You becoming more sort of self-aware, right? It opens you up, kind of on the especially when you like kind of raised by the engineers, went into the engineering school, right? So you're heavily oriented toward like solving problems, and kind of missing the human part of it. So I guess that was the gap that this like particular roles, like the as a BA or project manager, they allowed me to fill in.
Nice, cool. So you're originally from Kazakhstan, and you've had experience as a solution architect in Russia with Hewlett-Packard. What's the main difference between working, say, in Russia for Hewlett-Packard compared to working for an IT company in Canada?
Well, the difference is not so much about the where this company is located. The difference is in the culture, right? So, as an example, while I worked for Hewlett-Packard in Moscow, I worked in their small team. Like initially, it was very small, 18 people, and that team was recently acquired by HP. And the team was a development house, like an R&D and professional services for HP BSS and OSS products. So with like customers spanning all around the world. So we had like companies in Poland, in France, in Middle East, in South America, in Canada, mainly like of course like mobile operators, mobile phone operators, and that particular like group was amazing because I worked in a startup environment inside the big corporation. So you're working with people who are like real space engineers. And I'm not kidding, because many of our engineers, they came from the Russian Space Agency.
Good heavens, that's cool.
Yeah, so you kind of you kind of dealing with this, and the environment is like very opportunistic, right? And you have sometimes you have to do impossible. Like, let's say there is a task and your boss is coming and telling you that, you know, we need to do this, this, and that, and we need to present it to the client, let's say by the end of the day tomorrow. And by the way, there is no documentation. Nobody's done that before, so you have to do it, right? When it comes to Canada, again, it depends. Like in my experience, I work in different like IT companies in Canada. Some of them were very similar to like HP, to the team that I worked in Moscow. Some were more, how to say, some were like quite different. And so from my observation, the difference was more on the, again, on the cultural side. So as an example, I work for a number of corporate clients, and like the complexity is mainly in the history, like buried in the history, how this company evolved, the very complex relationship inside the company, right? And then if you add to that the theme of acquisitions, which is like extremely painful, right, for all parties. And then if there are such acquisitions, they kind of people very often like do them for the first time, so they don't do them well, right? They try to merge like again companies that have like totally different cultures. They're not necessarily like one is wrong and another one is right. It's just there is no like consideration put into it. They just, what I noticed, have a tendency to give these companies a little bit of time, and then they just start making harsh decisions. So I guess the biggest difference that I noticed when I came to Canada was that in my old world at HP, problems were getting solved like very, very quickly. While in Canada, I noticed that the corporate culture has a tendency to accumulate problems and then wait for one of these problems to raise to to grow to the size of the crisis, and only after that they they try to find the solution. I don't know whether I answered your question well enough.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Of course. I mean, 18 people is small enough that you can get things done much more quickly. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's that's hilarious. So what? I mean, you transitioned once from a product owner role to a project manager role. Any tips for folks who aspiring folks who want to do this transition?
I would say that it's not a difficult transition at all. So technically speaking, product owner is to some extent a project manager. It's just like a slightly different, I would say, outlook, and maybe the boundaries of the role, they're a little bit different. So product owner historically was essentially a split from the project manager role, because folks essentially in Scrum, they decided that it will be better to create this like healthy tension inside the teams if we make one person responsible for team performance, and that's the Scrum Master, and another person essentially responsible for the value side of the team, so the team delivering value. So one person, one role, which is like a product owner, will be focused on bringing the highest value, right? And the other person will be focused on the keeping like the team performance high. So the product owner in that respect has that role has like a very strong, I would say, like skills when it comes to the requirements, like management. project managers, they not necessarily like eliciting requirements, right? The only difference I would say is learn how to deal with like executives committees, which is actually not that difficult. So you're dealing with the essentially steering theme of steering committees, and you just need to. It's pretty much like more like a stage performance. So you need to know who are your actors, like what do they want, and how to essentially bring them all together. People in steering committees, they typically occupy very high positions, so they have lots of power, and at the same time they're extremely vulnerable, like internally. So you need to keep it in mind, right? So your steering committees are pretty much like regular meetings where you have to prepare to like way in advance. So when it actually happens, like there are no frictions, everything is hunky-dory, everybody is in agreement. So the other part I would say is the vendor management, especially in big companies. So you need to learn how to establish and develop relationship with third parties, because in your projects, it's not necessarily going to be your team who will do the work. It could be the company hired from outside. And the best thing to do is just to develop relationship with them and help them, and so you can through like relationship, you can essentially influence them and have like honest conversations, right? That's what I would say. Like that would be my personal advice.
When you said the actors, it reminded me of a Shakespeare quote: "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." So that's how it goes. When it comes to Waterfall and Agile, is there a real distinguishing difference between Waterfall Project Manager and Agile Project Manager in your experience?
Well, to be honest, like I haven't found any big difference when it comes to methodology, right? Or like the process. It's all about the I would say there are two different themes embedded into each of these roles, right? So when it comes to the like a waterfall project manager, right? So that role is typically put like lots of focus on the initial stages of the project, because they're the most risky, right? And you spend quite a lot of time on like listing requirements, nailing things down, building like artifacts. Sometimes these artifacts, they're like really like huge, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to the agile world, so you pretty much doing something similar, but you're doing it like constantly.
Okay.
So it means that what you do, you pretty much define what are the goals, you elicit the requirements, then you do it at a very high level, then you focus on the those like deliverables that have the highest value, and then you essentially try to deliver them in like smaller chunks, so you can reflect on the work done, because you can be totally wrong while you like moving to your goal, right? And so as a result, essentially your risks are smaller. The cost of the risks is smaller. If you did something wrong, let's say you're running a sprint, and like imagine like all deliverables were wrong, so it means like the cost of your failure is only 2 weeks of work,
right?
So I would say these are like two major differences. Other than that, everything else, like when it comes to like stakeholder management, relationship, team dynamic, it's pretty much the same.
Interesting. Yeah, what was that? Something dawned on me. Oh yeah, it was like saving the old Microsoft Word. You had to save your document manually every 10 minutes, or it would, if you worked on a document for an hour and it crashed, you've lost all that work. So now, but I mean, now there's autosave, right? But I mean, long before that, it's kind of this iterative, making sure that you're always checking your work. And if you lose any work, the risk is, well, you only lost 10 minutes of work. So the risk in an Agile is, well, you only lost 2 weeks of work as opposed to, anything longer than that.
Yeah, sometimes people they think that some people they say that when you're running in Agile, you don't really have any plan. This is like totally wrong. You always need to have a plan, right? You need to have a goal. You need to shape that future state where you want to bring like that point B.
Yeah.
And then just Agile just allows you to essentially reach that point a little bit faster.
Okay.
So, but then we're like extremes, and the extremes are coming from the theme of entrepreneurship. And this is where people actually start like mixing things together, and this is what probably creates this confusion, because in entrepreneurship, right, you validate ideas. So it means like you have an idea, you think that it's gonna work, right? You kind of build either the prototype or you build the MVP product, right? And then you essentially test it, right? And it can be good or it can be total rubbish, but then you learn from it, right? But that's like an extreme of the Agile. This is where indeed like you don't really have a goal because you don't have a business model. You don't have essentially a product. You're just trying to find it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a very specific area of applying this sort of iterative like approach that people take like everything is like that. And it's not true.
It's not true. That's good. All right. Now you transitioned from an Agile project manager to a Scrum Master, and it's probably similar to going from product owner to project manager. Is there, so you go from project manager to Scrum Master. Are there any differences between these job titles, or is it just sort of are the roles sort of uniquely independent of one another?
They do have similarities, right? So you essentially looking at the again like everything related to the team, but I would say the biggest difference is, or I would say the biggest differences are when you're a Scrum Master, right? You have to follow certain rules. Scrum is relying on the power of the small social groups. So when you are dealing with the Scrum team, right? You actually addressing them as a team. So every time you make an announcement, every time you raise the question, right? You will be asking the whole team, and that's what you will be trying to at least to do. So you're not really like picking on like a specific person, right, in the team. You're trying to kind of instill this like feeling of like the team. So like this group joint responsibility. Okay. When it comes to the project manager role, it's in a classical sense, slightly different scenario, because if you're having, let's say, any kind of like issues with your project group, right? I won't call this team at this point. You might not have a team, especially at the beginning. You can this like the traditional framework does not have this sort of tools, does not have the structure, like embedded structure that creates that power of the small social groups. So it means like in Scrum, actually the team can fix itself, because like there is this positive team pressure inside the teams, and people, it's just our nature. We probably evolved that from like living in caves, right? People comply. It's like a very strong power, right? But then it comes to the more traditional approach, like the that we have, like we were originally having in like PMI, and that approach is more how to say, is missing that part, or was missing. Maybe right now they already added it. And as an example, if you're having like troubles with one of the people, one of the persons on your project team, you typically do not have a power, like a functional power over this person. And especially in big organizations, you cannot, very often, you cannot really have like an honest conversation with this person, because it will put you into troubles, because that person has a boss. So you need to go and talk to the boss.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is like when you Scrum, you're pretty much sitting with these guys, with these people. They might have a boss, but you don't have to go to him. You just like change the paradigm, and you're just acting and in a different like mode.
So it's like it's more like a project-oriented type of role, as opposed to, like you said, a functional role where you don't have that power.
And you have to be ready to do certain things yourself. So if somebody is essentially, so if somebody is struggling, you should be able to go and actually try to do it together. Then if you cannot do certain things, you cannot help your teammates, you must have ability to walk around and ask for help. And that's another thing that you will be kind of injecting into the team, right? So do not sit still, walk around, ask for help. So it's a different setup, and it's, in reality, it's very intense. Scrum is like super intense, because you have like 2 weeks, right? And in this like 2 weeks, people make a commitment themselves. It's not like somebody come and tells them you have to do this, right? They have to say, we can do this amount of work, and we're responsible for delivering it. So it creates like a very strong sense of ownership, right? And so as a result, like in my experience, like Scrum sprints, they're very, very intense. So but at the same time, I found them to be quite rewarding, because you have like 2 weeks of sort of time when you avoid any kind of escalations. And it's especially important in the technology companies, right? So people can actually have a peace of mind for 2 weeks and focus on the specific deliverables, right? And that create like a cadence when you give them that like peaceful time, but intense, but and then like at the end of the sprint, you have a demo, and you must be already prepared with the potential scope for the next sprint. So it's quite different in terms of the like, you know, overall like feeling and the rhythm. But it's very easy to learn. All you have to do is just do it. It's kind of already embedded into our nature. And it can be a little bit offsetting at the beginning, but once you kind of go through this like internal, like small internal transformation, suddenly you realize how much easier it is working in Scrum teams compared to, like, you know, the more traditional approach, because you're breaking many barriers. You're like your team members, like the members of the Scrum team, they start sharing knowledge. It's a great learning tool. So it means like if somebody is leaving your team or your project, the team still holds like quite a lot of knowledge. But if you don't have this sort of setup, right, it means like and you have more like a traditional way where you have like a function, how to say, like a more like a knowledge essentially domains like assigned to specific people. Once this person leaves, right, and he didn't collaborate, he was keeping that, you know, how to say, that like expertise to himself. He leaves like a hole of his own size, right? And it's very hard to fill in.
It's like a silo. That silo is, you can't penetrate it, it's gone type of thing. You don't have access to it, it's gone. Yeah, okay, I get it. Interesting. So in the case of Scrum, right, we know Scrum's, like you said, there's a lot of transparency, a lot of inspection, adaptation. You know, it's embracing this idea of empiricism. What are some of the pitfalls that you've experienced in, say, things like sprint planning or daily Scrum or sprint review or sprint retrospectives? Any sort of hurdles that we can try and overcome?
Yeah. So let me say this way. I noticed that very often teams like they don't really value that much or sometimes they're afraid of the retrospectives, especially in the organizations that are transforming. So from like a very functional siloed, sort of way of organizing themselves to more like team oriented, right? So it's hard to sometimes to make people speak, so they stay muted. It takes time, or they just like say some things that are not really important. So it takes time to kind of overcome those like situations. And so Scrum is not something that you can just throw on people and it will start working right away. And that's these are the things that I observed in the past, that people are trying to kind of push it on their like organizations, and very often without explaining like why. And so it has to be to some, I would say, like a discovery process. So and it has to be on a permission basis. So when you start small, you essentially ask people permission to do this experiment, and then you allow them to learn themselves. So you cannot really tell them how to do things. They actually, most of the tricks that Scrum has, people discover them themselves as they go. You need to give them that space to learn, to have those like aha moments. And so this is way how they actually feel that this is their own. They start essentially seeing it, believing it, and so on and so forth. The one thing about the Scrum that I personally noticed as I would say as a caveat, Scrum is not like a silver bullet. So it means like you cannot really fix like certain issues, especially existing ones in the teams. So you need in existing teams. So you really need to realize that who are you bringing together, right? So if you bring like people who have a story of fighting with each other, so maybe the dynamic is not going to be great on the team. So this sort of stuff. Other than that, I would say I've been doing it for the last probably, I don't know, maybe like 11 or 12 years. And I'm using the elements of Scrum and Agile pretty much in everything that I do. I not necessarily like advertise it as the Agile or Scrum revolution.
Yeah.
And like to me, it works. And so if it works, I use it. If it doesn't work, I use something else.
That's it. Pick and choose. Yeah, definitely good. When it comes to estimating, what's your favorite form of estimating? Fibonacci, planning poker, prioritization poker?
Well, like I personally I got used to the story points estimates.
Okay.
With story points estimates, you can use like, of course, the Fibonacci sort of Fibonacci sequence. Poker, essentially, estimation poker is just a technique. How you can estimate, let's say, in story points, right? What I really like about the story points is that you're breaking away essentially from the days and like hours, and that's one part. So that makes like makes it easy for people to give you an estimate, because like if you start asking them like hours and days, these words almost immediately turn into commitment and duration in their heads. So that one part. Another part is when it comes to the estimation poker and this like story point estimation techniques, what people sometimes forget is like you actually utilizing the comparative estimating approach. So you need to have some known like work that you estimated, right? Maybe a couple of user stories, and let's say one is like 1 story point, another one is like 13. So you have this like range, so you can write it on a whiteboard. And then what you're actually doing with new user stories, you're comparing them in size, right? Empirically with this like range. How much bigger that new user story might compared to like these two, you know? And it actually works like magic, especially when you have to estimate big chunks of work. I had like I have a experience once stepping into some situation when I had to help like another company to bring like a product to the market, and they were pushing to release this product in like 6 weeks. And what I will tell you next is a real story. It's not a joke. So I sat with the product team. We listed all the deliverables, all the stories. Then I went to the engineering. I estimated those, like scaled those user stories and story points. We kind of figure out what's going to be the what is the current velocity of the team in story points. We looked at the previous like work that the team was doing at the releases, and it became apparent that the work that they were trying to do will take more than 18 months. so that's the power of the story points.
That's good. Yeah, it tells you where you're at. Now you transitioned from a project manager to a product manager. Any big difference in mindset between these two roles?
Oh, it's much harder job to do. Much harder. The reality is like your role essentially is the business role. You have I would say, like again, like no functional power. The players around you have much more like things to lose, right? And so it's much more difficult to operate. Your role essentially will be shifting, but again, like depending on what kind of product manager you are. But if you're moving into like a classical product manager role, you will be still working with teams, like pretty heavily involved. But at the same time, you will be spending a lot of time on, I would say, discovering and visualizing and negotiating the company strategy. In these sort of negotiations, you're not the owner of the strategy. So let's say when it comes to the company, you're not an owner. So you need to kind of extract and facilitate the strategy. And very often it already exists. Sometimes people just do not have it like written. Then you will somehow transfer the strategy into like product strategy. I'm talking about business strategy into product strategy, and then realize that's connection essentially, business strategy to product strategy. In other words, you're looking at the some sort of strategic drivers will pretty much define your roadmap. And that's the work that you have to do pretty much on a daily basis, and refine it and refine it and refine it. And at the same time, you need to sort of push yourself to meet with customers because you have to be outward oriented, and you will be meeting with people, right? And very often these meetings, they hit and miss. You still have to do them because it's very difficult to get insights from the customers. So I would say like if somebody would offer me like a role of the project manager tomorrow, I would say, oh my God, this is so easy. Like, it's so much easier.
By comparison, yeah, the product. That's kind of cool. So we've talked a bit about the places that you've worked, like Moscow. You've also worked at, well, you're in Vancouver. You've worked in Victoria, just across the river, or across the ocean, I guess, from Vancouver. Regina, Saskatchewan, Mississauga, Toronto, Burlington, and then of course your hometown of Kazakhstan. Which I'm curious, which city or which place is your favorite?
I would say my favorite place is Vancouver. And maybe it's because of the how to say some sort of a gestalt that I have in my head. So I have some distant relatives who immigrated to Canada after the war. And one of the family members visited them somewhere like at the end of 80s. And so I still remember when I was like a teenager and they brought me like a Vancouver hat and the keychain. And I was like, yeah, I want to be there.
So you made it. You made it after all those years. Nice. Yeah. I lived in Vancouver when I was a very young child, very like from age 2 to 5 or 3 to 5, very long time ago. It was very brief, but I remember taking the ferry to Victoria to see an aunt and uncle of mine who have since long passed away. And man, I got sick on that ferry. I just that's all I remember. It was a long time ago, but I've been to Vancouver many times since, but I just have never lived there. So I don't blame you. The weather's nice. It's cool.
No, it's beautiful. I wake up. We live like in a Fraser Valley, and I have like mountains all around my house. And
that's nice.
I would say like 6 months. 6 months a year, this is like the best place to live.
Oh, I know.
And then like the next 6 months is like raining, and you think like, why I'm here? So it has this like sort of polarization, like I don't know, like extreme experience.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So if anyone in the audience wants to get in touch with Anatoly, how can they do so?
Feel free to contact me via LinkedIn. I'm always open to new connections.
Fantastic. All right, great. Well, thanks for this kind of sort of semi-humorous and semi-informative, and but all together very, very lots to glean, and a true storyteller, lots of experience that people can learn from this. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.